All right. So as usual, these are the slides for this class, and we already know that we that most of the things that we want to talk about will mostly be within our VS Code. All right. So for today's class, we're talking about loops in Python. Right, in Python programming. It's a very important concept, right? The second part of control flow, which we did the other part in our previous class, which was conditional statement, right? A way of making our program to make choices, right? To decide to execute a particular portion and not execute a particular portion. So loops, on the other hand, it's almost the same thing with conditional statement, except this time around we are no longer deciding, but then we are repeating, right? So instead of the on the normal flow of execution, we can repeat certain portion of our code as long as we want, right? As long as we want. So as usual, we will dive straight to our VS Code, and then we do the talking and the practical day on VS Code. The slide is also available when I'm notified to release it to you guys. I will definitely release it to you guys. Okay, so real quick, we head over to VS Code, and and so I have my folder here created here, right? That contains all our source code for this bootcamp. So all our source code and that we will ever write, will live within this folder. So far we have two files there. So I'll add the third file being loops in programming for this particular class. Okay, so for this particular class, I can as well release these files if there is need, right? If we actually need, I can release this file as well, this folder, and you can get it. Right. So I think someone has a question.
Hi,
So
good morning, sir.
good morning.
Sorry, sir. I graduated the class back. I just want to, since the last task that we were given, is it that all of the functionalities is embedded in what we have created, and people went extra mile to do some other things? I just want to be clear because let me know if I'm really understanding.
Okay, but I didn't actually really hear you clearly, but if I could, yeah, so I joined some point that I heard. So you said that if the task I gave is within the scope of what we've been taught, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it's within the scope, including this particular class. So this particular class. So it's within what we've been taught and not outside what we've been taught, right? Including this particular class, please. So that tax assume that this class has been covered, which is what you are about to cover, right, for today. So when you add these concepts to what we've learned so far, then that tax should be as easy as, right? Are we good?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So any other question before we proceed? Okay, so no other question. So this is not really a fair, so I'll take it off. And this is not really a fair as well either. So this is not us. This is where we left off in our previous class. Okay, so I would simply just add a new file to this folder, and I'll call it 3 for arrangement sake. Okay, so I'll call it 3, and then I'll call this loops. Right, so loops in Python. So loops of Python. So what exactly is loop? Right. So outside the concept of programming, we've heard of the word loop, and from its name, it simply means repetition. Right. So loop is basically repetition. Right. Basically repetition. Repetition. Repetition, right? So it's basically repetition. So the process of repeating a specific portion of our code over time, right, is what we know as loop, right? It's a very interesting concept. So before now, we basically have a situation where we only execute our code one time, and then when the code gets to the end, it terminates, right? So it only executes once and can never repeat. So there are some situations where we need to repeat the same thing, the same process, right? Right, over a period of time. Let's take a example from our previous code. So we have this code that we had here, right? Where we have a situation where we are determining certain things based on age. right? What if we had a situation where we have about 10 to 100 edges? So it means that we need to do what execute this code 10 to 100 times. So we execute the first time, and then probably if the first edge was 18, then we put 18 there, and then we choose our gender like male, and then the code runs one time, right? Now, what if we had another edge? It means that we have to do what re-execute this code again over and over, and then we keep doing that process of re-executing, because this code runs one time. So loop comes in to help us repeat things based on a specific number of time or based on a specific condition, right? So depending on the kind of loop. So in Python we have two kinds of loops. So we have two types of loops in Python. Two types of loops in Python programming. We have a for loop. So up top, we have a for loop. Sorry, for loop, and we have a while loop. While loop. All right, so very two interesting loop types. Right, they are very two interesting loop types, and both of them do the act of repeating. The difference is that one is known, one is not known, and so basically, what I mean is that for loop is a kind of loop that executes that executes that executes based sorry that repeats rather that repeats a portion of our code, portion of our code based on a number of items in a structure. Don't worry, I'll explain to you what I mean by items in a structure, right? In a structure. Right, and while loop on the other hand, it's a kind of loop that repeats things. So I basically copy this man because both of them repeats a portion of code. So and this particular one repeats a portion of our code based on a condition, based on a condition. So that's the two difference between each of them, but they all repeat things. So one of them does the repeating based on the number of items in a structure. Now there are different structures in Python, right? So for loop works best with structure, right? So a structure is basically a collection of items. So we could have something like this. Let's say we want to create a structure that stores a collection of fruits. So let's say we have something like let's say we have something like mango, we have something like apple, we have something like we have something like pineapple, right? Pineapple, right? And this could be three items that live within a specific structure. Now, the structure that there's several kinds of structure, right? So the structure doesn't really matter. So the main thing is what is the number of items in that structure, right? So, but we haven't actually gotten to data structures in Python. But then there's a built-in function also in Python that we could use to create a very simple structure, right? A very simple numerical structure. So this built-in function can be used to mimic how data structures behave in Python. So since I haven't gotten the data structure, I won't really dive deep to how to create these structures. But then what we could do is we could use this built-in function called range, right? So range is a built-in function that takes numbers and then creates a structure within that numbers. So basically create items that looks like a structure from zero all the way to that number that you've specified. So it means that if I should have 5 here, this man here will simply create a structure of item from zero all the way to 5. So we have something like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but not 5, because if you count these items, it's basically what 5 items. So it creates a structure that put 5 items starting from zero all the way to that number, but not that number itself, right? So for loop works with structure, right? So we don't really need to know how to create this structure at this point, but what we can do is that we can use this built-in function and then mimic or create like a demo structure that looks like structure, right? That we can use to do what to repeat a portion of a code based on a number of items in that structure. So if you are to use this built-in function called range, okay, and then we specify 5 as number of items that should be in that structure. So it means that if I should give this structure to a for loop, it means that for loop will repeat that portion of our code in what 5 times, because we have 5 items in that structure. Do you understand? Do we understand? Is there a question before we?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we understand that is fine. All right, so now let's now see how we can combine these structures, right, with for loop, so that what a certain portion of our code can do what can execute. So I will comment on this out for reference purpose, and we'll simply come back here and then we put a what the for loop syntax. Now, so it's similar to our conditional syntax. So these are the syntax of our conditional statement should be structured. So same thing happened with for loop, right? There is how you should do what structure your for loop sentence, so that once Python sees it, it knows, okay, this portion of code is what should repeat based on a number of items in a structure, right? In this case, this structure is range, right? We're using range to do what to create this structure. So the syntax is this, right? So it has similar to if, right? So for also start with for. So it means that we cannot use for as a variable name. So I can't have for being equals to 5, right? So this will turn an error, because once Python sees for, it knows that you're about to create a structure that should repeat a portion of code based on the number of items in that structure, right? So what they expect is a variable name, right? So this variable name is optional, right? It's optional. So you can choose to put that variable name, you can choose to remove it. But then if you choose to put that variable name, then that variable name will come here, right? That variable name will come here. So your variable name will come here. And then, or if you don't, or if you do not wish to put that variable name, then what you should do is for you to leave underscore, right? So it's either a variable name or an underscore, right? So it's developer's choice. So the for loop followed by the variable name or underscore, and then there's a keyword called in, right? And then your structure down follows, right? Your structure comes here, which in this case would be our range, right? And then followed by a colon, and then the portion of code that you intend to do or to execute. So the portion of code to execute, right? So I and same with conditional. This portion of code can be as long as, right? So it doesn't really need to be just one level of instruction. It can be as long as possible. So but the thing is that for that portion of code to be repeated, that portion needs to be indented. If I should take this man out of this indentation, then this man does not get to repeat itself. So it means that this man here will execute one time and end. So it means that after these people have been repeated for the number of items in that structure, then this man here will get to execute one time, right? And then ends. Do you understand? Right. So the silence means that we understand properly. Good. Right. So now having this syntax in mind, right? So I would indent this man inside. So this man should follow the proper indentation. So having this structure, this syntax now in mind, then let us repeat a specific portion of code. So I will have a very simple instruction, an instruction that gets two numbers and then simply return the explanation. Okay, sorry, the addition of those two numbers. So I'll have num1 as variable, and I'll simply typecast this because I want all this to be integers, and then I will pass my message enter a number, and I'll leave it there, and then I'll repeat the same thing for the other one, and I'll call this probably add enter first number, and this will be enter second number, and this should be my num2, because if these people should have the same name, then it simply means that at this point this one will override the other value, and we don't want that, right? We do not want that. So and then at the end of it all, I will simply just have result equals to num1 plus num2. Right? So a very simple instruction, right? A very simple instruction, and then at the end of it all, I would simply just say the addition of number one and two. Number two is, then I'll give my result there. All right, so okay, so now if we now execute this, of course, this follows the default flow of execution. So it will start from the first instruction all the way to the last instruction, and it run one time, right? So if I should have 10, have my 20 here, this give me what 30, right? But then that code has ended, right? That code has finished. Has finished the instruction. That is the default flow of execution in Python. But then what if we had other people that intend to also add two numbers? Let's say you have like about 10 users, right? Because the thing about for loop is that you must know how many times it should loop, right? So because the number of items we have there determine what the number of repetition, right? So it means that before the loop even starts, you as the developer, you know how many times this will do what will repeat, right? So it means that in this case we have to assume that we have let's say 10 users, or let's say 5 users, right? We have 5 users that intend to do what to carry out this calculation, right? So in that case, for loop works best because for loop works with what we know the number of times it will repeat. So in that case, what I can do is I can simply carry this whole execution or this whole portion, being that that is what we want. So I can carry this whole portion and simply do what embed it in a for loop. And then the for loop syntax says that we must start with what with for, followed by what either a variable name or an underscore, but I'll go with a variable name. So I will simply say for item. So item there is my variable in structure. So the structure here, since we haven't gotten to data structures yet, what we can do is we can use range, a built-in Python function that we can use to do what to create or mimic structures in Python, right? So where this range takes in a number and then creates a structure from 0 all the way to that number, but not that number. So it means that if I say in range of 5, it means create a structure starting from that contains 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 as the elements of that structure. Okay, so if I should now say for item in range of 5, so and then put my colon. Remember, there's a colon after the structure there, right? So then what I can now do is I can now simply indent all these people, and this becomes what the portion of code that we intend to do to execute. So at this point, if I should go out of this indentation and put another instruction here, say this instruction here, I will say the end. So it means that before we get to this instruction, that this portion of code will repeat 5 times, right? Okay, 5 times because we have 5 items in that structure, right? So if I should come back again and then execute, and real quick for readability sake, right? So I will simply just put an empty print here, okay, as the last instruction. So it means that once you execute all the way to this point, leave an empty space before going back to the word to repeat again. So that's the portion. That's the purpose of that empty print there, so that we can know the end of each iteration. Okay. So I come back and I execute, and I have my first number 10. I have a span 120, and you see it does what it went back again and repeat the code. So it will go back again and repeat from the first instruction within that loop all the way to the last instruction within that loop, and it will repeat that based on a number of items we have in this structure. So remember we said about that range takes number and then create a structure that contains item from 0 all the way to the number itself but minus that number. So basically here it means from 0 all the way to, so I'll put this comment. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So this is for item 0. So this other one now is for item 1. So if I should put my 30, put my 40, I have 70, I have my then I put my 40, I put my 50. I have a third loop, and then I put my 50, I put my 50 again. We have a fourth loop, and then this should be the last iteration. This is what the last iteration, because this should be the 5th time we repeated that same instruction. So if I should now go ahead and probably I'll go with 100 and 100 this time around, and then you see that end that loop, right? So at that point the loop has finished, and then we've moved to other instruction if they were. which in this case there was just one instruction outside. So this one here follows the default execution of repeat of executing once and ending there. Are we making sense? Are you making sense? Question. Question. Right. So the silence means there is no question, right? That we are all properly understanding. That is fantastic. All right. So that is basically how for loop works, right? So it works off in structures, right? So it works best with structure rather. So you attach it to a structure, and then the portion of code that has been indented will get repeated based on a number of items in that structure. So for now we work with just the range structure, given that we haven't arrived at data structure yet, so we can't basically start creating complex structure and making the whole thing complicated for us, right? So that's the reason why we're using what range, right? Instead of the data structures that we have in Python itself. So range works just fine, right? Range works just fine. It works the same way as an actual data structures, right? All right. So that basically how for loop works, right? So the key thing is that for loop, you as the developer, you know how many times the portion of code will execute, because you know what you know how many items are in that structure, right? So you as developer, you already aware of how many times this man will execute. So that is how for loop works, right? So now moving up to while loop, being another type of loop in Python. Okay, but the while loop also works almost the same way with for loop, except this time around we don't need structures. So for while loop, what we need is condition, and in our previous class we said that conditions are basically any expression. So if we scroll down, we see it here. So conditions are what are any expression, right, that must evaluate to true to Boolean value, right? So that is what works with while loop. So while loop works with conditions, expression that result to true or false. But the only time while loop will execute the portion of code will repeat the portion of code within it is that condition must evaluate to what to true. That is how while loop works. So it repeats a portion of our code based on a condition that is true. So just add true there so we know that is true, because that is the only time it will repeat that portion of code. And the syntax for while loop, it's quite simpler compared to all this long stuff in for loop, right? So for while loop, so syntax while loop syntax is that of course it starts with well. So this is another reserved word. So it means that I cannot do well should be equal to hello. But that doesn't work, right? Because while loop is reserved in Python. So when Python says while, you know that you want to create a repetition based on a condition, right? Based on a condition. So another thing again is that if your password reset works off for loop, right? So it means that it knows how many times you can make the mistake of typing a wrong password. So after that time has finished, then it locks it out. So that is how your password system works, right? So it works off with what we follow. But while loop can fit in, probably let's say a typical example where while loop can fit in is we could say it's a simple login system, right? Because we can never tell how many times a user can put wrong credentials. So it will keep taking you to it will keep asking you to do what to keep logging into whenever what that credential is has matched, right? So in that case, we don't really know how long the loop will go. So that's the difference. For loop, you know how long it goes. While loop, you cannot really tell because it works off as condition. So it only stops whenever that condition turns false. But for that condition still remains true, while loop will do from now to the end of time, right? That's how it works. So the syntax is while, right? And then followed by condition, and then followed by the colon, and then the portion of code to execute, and the portion of code code to execute, right? And this portion of code, as usual, can be as many as can be as many as possible. Right? It doesn't have to be just one instruction, right? It can be as many. And so that is how while loop work. So you see it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. While and then condition. Very simple, right? And very straightforward compared to what for loop has up there. While loop is very, very simple and straightforward. Right. So having this syntax in mind, all right. Now we can know what we can redo this particular exercise again, but then using what while loop. So I'll simply copy this man, right, and then just re-edit it to what to fit while loop, So I will paste this man here, and then I would comment on it out. Okay, and then I will re-change this thing because while loop we don't know how for how long. Okay, so while and then what it expects is condition. So you come back and then we'll fix a condition there, right? And then we put column. So basically, this should repeat as far as what this man here is true, and then this should only execute when that man turns false, right? So the rest of the code should execute when this man is no longer valid. All right. So how do we construct a condition that should end? Because if we should basically have this kind of expression, let's say 5 is greater than 5, right? Sorry, 5 is greater than 3. Now this is an expression, right? That will result to true. So because it results to true, it will start it will repeat this code. But the thing is that for while loop, for each time it repeats the code, it goes back and do what and check and reference the condition. Is it still true? If it's still true, then it comes back again and do what and repeat, and then go back again and reference the condition again, and then keep doing that till whenever that condition turns false. So it means that if I should execute this code as it is, right, this man here will never stop because we are giving a static condition that will always be true from now till the end of time. 5 will always be greater than 3, right? So as far as 5 remains, as far as that result remains that way, this man will loop forever, right? This man will loop forever. So if you try it out now, right? If you try it out now, you see that if I have 20, have 10, so it goes back again, right? 20 and another 10 again, 10 another 10 again, 20 another 20 again. So it will keep going and going and going and going till the end of. So maybe you probably have to force it to stop by simply just killing the terminal, right? But then apart from that, it will keep executing from now till the end of time. Yeah, so this becomes what? This becomes an infinite loop, exactly. So that's the key word there. It becomes an infinite loop. So it's a loop that never ends, right? And as developers, please, we should in all we do, please let us avoid infinite loop, right? So find a way to make sure that your loop will terminate. If possible, stop it by force, right? If possible, because it will be very frustrating that as a user, let's assume that you go to ATM stand, right? And then you slot in your card and you put your PIN. And for some reason, maybe there's a bug in the system and the system keep repeating that login session over and over and over again. That you insert both the wrong PIN, the correct PIN, and whatever PIN you want to put, and it still takes you back. It's frustrating. So please, let's always right try to do what avoid infinite loop. And what we've done here is creating one. We do not want to do that. So what we can do is we can find a way of constructing this man to be somehow not to somehow just somehow in at some point. So what I could do is instead of just hard coding this number here, I could simply just select A be 3, or sorry, let A be B, sorry, let A be 5, sorry, and let B be 3. All right, so and then I'll just simply replace this people here, A, and replace B here. Right. So now the thing is now the thing here is now, right? The thing here is that how do we now resolve this problem now? How do we now resolve the problem? Or how do we now make at some point let 5 no longer be greater than 3? So one way we could do is by either reducing this 5 at some point. I mean, probably after each loop we can reduce 5, right, to by 1, and then we keep reducing it to probably to when we have 5 and A is equal to about 3. So in that case, 3 cannot be greater than 3. So that man they will turn 4, right? And this loop end. Or we can do what? Increase B. And then at some point, B will be 5, where 5 is no longer what? greater than 5. So any way you want to use it, right? But then find a way, figure out something to make sure that this condition does not remain true from now to the end of time. Something should invalidate it, right? Something, some way should do what invalidate it. Something either within your code should do what should invalidate that condition at some point. So what I can do is that maybe before we do what before we go back again to repeat this code, right? I simply want to, in this case, I want to implement. So I simply want to say b should be equal to b plus 1. So I want to increment b by 1. So here I'm simply saying create a new variable called b, right? And then get the value of b up there, right? Which is 3, and then add 1 to that 3. So at this point, we have a new variable. So that means this b has overridden that other b up there. So at this point, b is no longer 3. B will now be 4 after the first loop, right? So when the loop goes back again, it now have it that the value of b is what is 4. So now it's going to go and check what the condition against what 5 is greater than what 4, which is still true, right? And then it comes back again and look. And then when it comes back again, we do what we create another new variable called b to override the other b, right? And then at that point, the other b was 4. So we simply will add 1 again to that 4. At that point, b is what 5. So it now goes back again with the value of 5 to check what if a is greater than b, which in this case 5 is greater than 5, which is not possible, right? So it means that this condition here becomes for false. So as such, this loop does what end automatically, right? So that way, it simply means that this loop will only run 2 times if it's true, right? So if it's true, this man here will only run what twice and then end, right? So if we try that out, we have that it executes the first time. So I have my 10, I put my 10 there, and then what happened? It add 1 to b, so b is now 4, which is still true, right? So I add my 20 to my 20 again. And then you see the loop ends, right? Automatically that loop ends on its own because at some point the condition was what was now false, right? The condition was now false at some point. So for that reason, this one does what end automatically. That's the difference between for loop and while loop. While loop, we don't really know how long it can go. Okay, so but for loop, before it starts, we know, right? We can simply just tell by knowing the number of items in that structure. But while loop, it's condition based, right? So what we have here is a very simple condition, right? It's a very simple condition, right? This code can grow to more complicated condition, probably conditions that are depending on input factors, right? But for this particular example, we are doing a very simple instruction here that you can just play around and then at some point terminate this condition. Question.
Okay, question, please.
Okay.
What if I try to say A should be equal to input, right? That the user has to input figure of their choice, and then B has the same function, and
Okay. So
then so why A is greater than B do this, so that whenever the user inputs, and the user does not know the condition underneath it. So in any case where the user places a smaller figure in A, the loop ends. Am I
so
making any sense?
for some reason, I think I'm hearing almost I think very little of what I say. Well, I don't know if someone has heard that properly, but from what I've heard so far, I don't know. Maybe you said that what if we change B to be an input where the user has to type in, right? And then we can construct a connection based on that input, right? Did I get that
Yes,
properly?
like making A and B be an input where the user has to input
Okay.
any figure of their choice, right?
Oh,
And then
okay.
for the condition, yeah, you put A should be why A is greater than B,
Okay.
do this. So that
Okay.
when the user inputs their key, because the user does not know the functionality underneath it. So
Okay.
whenever the user puts a small figure in A, then the loop ends. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
I get your point. Okay, I get your point. All right, so if that's the case, right? So let me recap that question that you just said. So I'm sure that is what you're asking. So you're asking if we change A and B to be input where user can simply type in, and then we now do what? Replace those value we work with our condition here, and then still hold, and then these increments still hold, right? But then the user is not aware of this increment, right? And then what if that will work, right?
Yes, without the increment actually.
Okay, without the increment,
Yes.
yes, it will of course if the value of A is greater than the value of B, this code will do what we execute. But the problem is that it will execute from now to the end of time because we've not find a way to do what to terminate it. And what happens is that code that lives outside your loops, right, execute one time. So if I should transform this to input, it means that the user will only input those value one time, and this loop runs from now to the end of time, right? Except probably we have to come inside this loop and do what and add other inputs, a means of doing what of invalidating, right? A means of invalidating. So if we change this to input, right, I think we have input somewhere. So I'll copy this man and just replace this man. So I think I told you guys before that that majority of the times in our life that we mostly be copy and pasting over time. So and I think that moment is coming closer. So we just copy and just replace, right? So I'll have my
A.
right. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Ah, please hold on. Please can you let me not copy this man. Place this man up there. And I'll change number one to A, I'll change number two to B, right? This is to work. So it means that, and then we remove this means of invalidating. It means that if I should execute this code, right, and I've entered my first number of that's for A, right? So let me be specific. So it doesn't enter okay number for A. Yeah, enter number for A, and sorry, I feel lazy to edit that second one. So I'll copy and paste and just change this to B. Change this to B. Okay. And execute. All right. So enter number for A, and then we put like let's say for any reason we have something like let's say we have 3 as A and 5 as B. Nothing will happen because at this point, A is not greater than B, right? So the code doesn't even execute. And if the end user is doing this, right, it's you have problem because majority of the time the end user might end up being doing something like this, right? And then and then your code may end up not even executing. So imagine going to ATM, right? And then until you enter the value of loop, and then you type 10 or probably 100, right? And then you don't really know how the 100 works behind the scene. So a lot of things can actually go wrong, right? A lot of things can actually go wrong. So even if you can't really control what the user type, but as a programmer, you should try to do what to control how your code will react to certain things. One way you can do is probably in this kind of situation, you can come in here and do some conditionals, right? Probably no, maybe after the whole this whole input, you can just come in here and do some if. Now, if A is less than B, then you can just switch those values, right? Carry the value of B and carry the value of A and give B, and then execute your loop, right? So it's all depending on you, right? So you have to actually manage how your code reacts. But then what you cannot do is manage what users will do what will type. Do you understand?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Okay, Mr. Barry, your hand is up.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, maybe shall understand a lot, but I thought what she was trying to say was whether there
Okay.
is a way, like without it to end by itself, like the user has to type something before the code ends. Maybe like what she's trying to say.
Okay,
Like the
okay.
user
Yes.
has to.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yes, there is a way. Yes, there is a way that can be worked out. Yes, there is a way that can be worked out. Probably what you could
Okay.
just do is for you to maybe put some conditionals inside here, right? And then just terminate the loop once certain things has been typed in. Right? Then you terminate the loop. Well, in order for us to achieve that, we need to understand what you want to talk about again, being what loop keywords. So that works with loop keywords, right? Where we can terminate a loop even when that loop is still active, right? So I think if I don't know who asked the question. Was that what you're trying to ask? If you can actually terminate this loop from user input, right?
Yes.
All right. So let's quickly look at loop keyword, and then we'll come back and resolve that issue, right? We'll come back and resolve that issue. So, but for this particular one, where user has to type these things in, right? What you can do is you can manage certain things like this. Probably do conditionals here, and just check that probably if B, right? Because our condition says that what that A has to be greater than B, right? But for any reason that B is actually greater than A, right? Or or A is same thing as B, right? Then what we could do is we could probably just maybe let's the user know that A should be greater than B, right? And not less than or the same, right? So you can just come here and put in your message, and then maybe bring in another input down there so that they can do what we type. Okay. So that's one way you can actually manage that. All right. So, but real quickly, let's look at loop variables, right? Loop variables. But a very sorry, loop keyword rather. Sorry, loop keyword. Loop keyword. Right. So these are basically right. These are basically keywords that alter the default behavior of a loop. Right. So this keyword, once this keyword is present within your loop, they alter how your loop behaves. So those are these keywords, right? And they are two in number, right? They're just two in number, which is a break, and we have another one called continue. Continue. Right? So you have break, we have continue, and this keyword, please, this keyword works perfectly well within loops. If you take them outside loops, they may behave in ways that you cannot even imagine, right? Probably they may not actually do the whole purpose of what they are meant to do. So please try and use this keyword within loops, right? Be it for loop or while loop, right? As far as it's loop, this keyword works in there. So the way break works is that it terminates the loop. It terminates the it terminates the loop. It terminates the loop um, before time, right? Before time, okay? Terminate the loop before time is, and then continue, simply skip the loop. It skips. So we will see it, how they work practically, right? So it skips the current loop, the current iteration rather, to a new one. Right. So let's see how these people work. Let's see how these people work. Right, so I will comment what we have down here for while loop, and then I'll try it out with for loop, and then as well come back and try it out with while loop as well. So let's look at it at for loop level. Right, let's look at it at for loop instance. So I would uncomment this man and comment on these other people. Right, so before now, it means that if we should execute this loop, right? If you execute this code, it means that this entire instruction would do what? Would terminate would terminate, sorry, would execute from what, from this line all the way to what, to this line. And it will do that for what, for 5 times. By default, that what will happen. It will execute that code what, for 5 times. So if I should run, let's execute. And then of course put 10, 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 put 10. So that is what, that is 5 iteration, right? 5 iteration, because we have 5 items in that structure. All right. But then if we now introduce this keyword into this loop, it may behave somehow. So let's assume that after this line, I simply just come here and put break. Right? What will happen is that once this loop starts, this line will do what? Will execute. And this line will do what? Will execute. Right? And then, but then what happens is that the moment it comes across this man, it will end the loop. So it means that the loop won't even finish. It will what? It will terminate it there, because at that point, that's means what, the break keyword. And the break keyword states that it will terminate that loop at where it is, right? So let's not, don't even bother to do what, to go ahead and finish the loop. Just end it there and let's call it a day. That's basically what the break keyword does. So if I should run this again, so we have 10, we have 20, and then the end, right? Nothing happened again. And that's because after this first iteration, which did not even complete, the break keyword was being fired, right? So, but then you wouldn't want to do what, to just place it like randomly, right? Probably you would want to have instances where certain things must trigger it to do what, to stop instantly. So what I can do is that maybe I could say that if a user should for any reason, that we can add this addition, and the result, so I'm going to put it down here. Probably I'm going to put it at the last thing. And if the result, right? If the result is, let's say, for any reason, we did some calculation and the result is above 100, right? Then I basically want to just go ahead and break, right? So it means that only break when this addition is above 100, right? So it means that for this thing to loop 5 times, that whatever we are adding needs to stay below 100. Right? For any reason, for any iteration that we have above 100, then do what, terminates that loop. So if I should run this again and enter my first number, 10, and then you see we have 20, and then the loop repeats again. But then if I now have 120, you see, it shows us 120, because this result is 120, and we have a condition in place that says if it's 100, if it's above 100, end it. So you see that what, it ended that loop. So the third, the fourth, and the fifth time never executed, right? So it terminates the loop abruptly. That is how break keyword works. Question before we move to continue. Question. Question. All right. So it's,
Question, please.
sorry.
Question, please. Can I add my while loop under the for loop,
Yes.
like a nested loop?
Yes, you can. You can. Now, all these things are concepts that can be used anyway. It doesn't. And the law that said that this one must stay alone, or the other one must stay alone. So like what we have here, we have conditional, right, inside while loop. But then the rules that govern conditional must still do what, must still be obeyed, and the rules that actually govern these loops must still be obeyed. So it means that you have to do this and then indent it. And same thing with if, you have to give if, and then the condition, which must be what, a boolean value, and then you have to give the action, right? So as far as those things is being obeyed, these things can be used anyway within themselves, right? Within themselves. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So Mr. Gabriel, your hand is up.
Good morning, my boss.
Good morning, sir.
I was checking something yesterday, and I used this break.
Okay,
But I noticed that after I used the break, like after the break, I wrote something like print something. You get? So after
okay.
that print something, there is also other options I wrote there, like impute something after the break. So I was thinking that after this break, that after the thing print the next one, it will stop. But it continued to ask for input. You get? So I was thinking that it will just end there if I use this input. I don't know what really happened or why is the thing is doing that like that, Sha. So can
All
you
right,
clarify me on that?
all right. So you said that you were doing some research, right? And then you came across the break keyword, and then you used it within your loop, right? And for some reason,
Yeah,
it did not break the loop. The loop keeps
yeah,
going on, right?
yeah.
All right. So what I would want to okay, to help us, right? If you could drop that screenshot on that code, and probably on the group, then we can come and talk about it. But the thing is that where you place your break matters, right? And where you place your break. For some reason, if I should skip this break, if I should put this break outside for some reason, right? You see, it's no longer in the loop, right? So where it is actually matters. So maybe your break was maybe because I'm not really seeing how you structured your instruction. Maybe the break it's in a way that because the thing is that your programming can you see your instructions can't just like that's it, right? So probably that break it's in a way that it cannot fire that break keyword, right? So some things like that can actually affect it. So, but for us to better understand ourselves properly, right, so we can guide ourselves through, is if you could just drop it, please. If it's the tax, right? If it's the tax code, like if it's the tax code, please don't drop it on the group, right? But if it's something that we're actually working on, doing random stuff, right? Then you can bring it to the group, and then we could actually look at where in fact after this class, once you just drop it, I'm sure that someone within this class will respond, right? But just drop it on the group and we'll see what is actually wrong with your code. Is that okay?
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you.
All right. So any other question? You have a question. How does loop performance affect speed of a program, especially in large data sets? Wonderful. All right. So okay, so what you should know is that so what you should know is that loops of course actually slows down your code, right? Because I think back then I think I watched one video where one guy was trying to say that if it's possible for us to actually write loop and sorry write instructions without loop, that it would be more preferable and more lighter, right? The thing is that the more loop you include in your code, the heavier your code because now your code have to repeat one particular portion over and over again, and each repetition is eating up your memory, right? But this looks here looks it's simple, right? So this wouldn't really take much time to do what to execute, but in a situation of large data sets and yeah, and loops is being used, trust me, it's heavy, right? It's heavy. I've been in a situation where I worked with image data set and I had to refactor those images and I used loop and the code executed for about almost 3 hours and did not finish, right? So please also note that also put that in mind that when dealing with loops, it takes depending on how much your instruction is, it takes time to do what to wrap it up. Okay, Mr. Gabriel, your hand is up.
Yeah.
So that's one thing again. Is there another way to break loop without using the keyword break?
Another way to another way to break
Break,
loop without using
yes,
the
without
keyboard.
using the keyword, yeah.
Yes, yes, that way is for the loop to loop completely. because there's no other way. Except we are using something like conditional loop where we can simply set a condition for a loop for something to automatically validate that condition. But as for loop, there is that loop has to complete itself, right? Because the for loop does not work with condition. But if it's while loop, we can have a situation where, okay, I could assuming this my while loop here, I could just simply say if I want to end that loop, I could simply say let a be equals to 6. That means that automatically, right? We've invalidated that condition, right? So it means that is false. So it will stop automatically. But outside that, then break works, right? Break is the only one that's shooting right there. Is that okay, Mr. Gabriel? Okay, Mr. Hamid. Your hand is up.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you very much, Mr. Bassi. So
Okay.
my question is regarding the comment you just made about
Okay.
being careful with the use of loops. So I wanted to ask, like, because if there is other alternative, because if you realize as a developer that your loop is getting too much, is there something else we can use, or maybe we haven't gotten there yet, but I just said I should ask it so that you could clarify that for us as well. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So, well, the thing is that the truth about the matter is that as a developer, you cannot actually avoid it, right? Because there are situations that you need things to repeat, right? Because you can't like, okay, assuming that we have this code, right? And then I need this code to repeat itself. I can't basically just copy this code and paste, right? Yeah, it will take a lot of time. Right? The truth is that if there is a way you can use a single loop to do what to accomplish a task, do it. But then once you nest that loop, now that inner loop again, which actually going to talk about again, right? A nesting of loops, right? The inner the way nesting works is it's heavy because for each inner loop to execute its cycle, the outer loop once, right? So it's more like don't worry. Once we get to nesting, probably I'll explain it better. But the thing is that there is just no way, right? What you could do is try as much as possible, right, to avoid nesting of loop. That's the best advice I can give, right? If there is a way that you can accomplish a task with just one single loop, please then use that one single loop. But looking at nesting, probably having like 2 to 3 to 4 nesting of loop, it's way too heavy. Way too heavy. So please, of course, the more you nest, it doubles that memory. So you nest 3 times, that it triples the amount of memory. Loops are very intense, right? So if there's a way of accomplishing a task with a single loop like this, right? Yeah, then please use a single loop, right? And try as much as possible to avoid nesting of loops too much, right? Nesting of loops drag a lot, right? They drag a lot of memory. Okay. But the thing is
Okay.
that we can't just avoid loop completely. There always trade-off, right? If you have trade-off, something must trade off something, right? Something must lag behind and something must do better, right? So that's the case.
Thank you, boss. Thank you.
Right. Any other question? All right, so there let's be no other question. So let's see how continue works, and then we look at nesting, and then we wrap it up for today's class, right? So continue works opposite is more like the opposite of nesting, right? Sorry, it's more like the opposite of break, right? So what it does is that it doesn't end the loop. It skip that repetition and then go. So it means that if I should let me take off this break here, right? It means that if I should have, let's say, if I should have something like continue after here, right? So basically, what I'm saying is that once I execute this code, repeat this line, right? Repeat this line, repeat this line. But then when you get to this line, abandon what we have down there, go back again and do for a new iteration. So it means go back again and repeat this man, this man, this man, then go back again, right? So abandon what is happening down there, right? That's basically what continue does. So break ends it, continue just takes it back again to the beginning, right? So it takes it back again to the beginning. So it means that if I should execute this code, this man here will ask us to input this number 5 times, but we never have the opportunity to do what, to come down to this point where we print them. Okay, so it looks to the end, but then it doesn't look completely. That's basically the difference, right? So you look to the end, but then it doesn't look completely. So if you execute it now, and you get to see that we have 10. You see, it takes us by again to what, to enter first semester and to enter first number. So this print that normally puts space in between was never executed. That's why it's non-joint. So we're not again 20, 20. So you go again 30, 13, 40, 40, 50, 50. So the iteration is complete, right? The iteration is actually complete, but then some parts did not actually do what execute. So that is what continue does. It skip, right? It skip the current iteration and takes it to a new iteration. That's what it does. Okay. All right. So I think. Okay. So Miss Grace, you said that that's a question. Please go ahead and ask the question.
Okay. Like the about the continuous actually, you said
Okay.
if you leave the other codes under and then go back and keep repeating, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
now that you have this input what's it called? To input
All
number,
right.
right?
Yeah.
If I want to add up all I have inputted, for instance, I repeated it for like 3 times. So repeating it for like 3 times, I already have six six figures there, right? And then I want to add up these 6 figures. How do I do that?
Okay. So let me get your question properly, right? So your question is that what if you wanted to add up like 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 everything that we've inputted here, right? From the first iteration to the last one, right?
Yes, yes, for the number of loops.
Okay. So
Like,
basically, we'll be doing something like this. Where we add the results 5 times, I mean, results plus results plus result plus result. I mean, that's basically what we will be doing, right? Okay. Because the first iteration, we can get the sum of the two numbers, right? With this result, I mean. So we basically want to be adding this result throughout the entire iteration. I believe that's a question, right? So you can basically have the sum of everything, right?
yeah, having the sum of everything.
Okay, exactly, right. So what you would do is that one thing you could do is that you can put a variable outside the loop, a variable that should not change, a variable that we don't want the value of that variable to change. Because if I should put it inside here, it means that for each time it loops, right, the value of that variable is updated. So we don't want that session, right? So you want a static one, and I can call this grand total, right? And then I can simply assign this to 0 for now. And then what I will not simply do, I'll just simply be adding result to what we have in grand total, right? So I'll simply say grand total equals to grand total plus result. So it means for each time we repeat things, right? Get the value of grand total, right? The current value of grand total and add it to the result, right? And then update that value of grand total, and then do that for each time we do what we iterate. And then probably at the end of it all, I could just simply just come here and just print the value of the grand total, right? And that should work. And if I should execute this now, say 10 and 10, 20 and 20, 30 and 30, 40 and 40, 50 and 50. We have nope. So that did not actually update. Let's see. Let's be sure. hold on. Let's debug. Hold on, let's debug. Let's see. Where are we?
You said the grand total plus result instead of the
Oh,
cost. Sorry.
sorry. Yeah. That's a very nice observation. That is what you should be. So this whole thing here is supposed to do what, to be the new value of the grand total, right? So we are basically overriding that value of grand total, right? So thank you very much, whoever observed that. Uh, free mark for you, but don't tell me your name. I will find you by your voice. Thank you very much. All right, so let's do that again. So 10 and 10, 20 and 20, 30 and 30, 40 and 40, 50 and 50. So you had a grand total of 300. So I'm sure that if you add this whole number of that should give you 300. So that's basically how you would solve that issue. That's basically how you would solve that issue. So,
All right, thank you.
all right. So I think I saw other people's hand up at some point. I think. Okay. So I think everybody's hand is down. All right. So that is basically how break and continue works. Right. That's basically how break and continue works. And so break end the loop, continues and skip the loop, right? And basically you want to place this thing in strategic places, right? You don't just want to carry them and just paste in your loop. If not, you have situation where some part is executing and some part is not executing, or some part execute once and ended the loop, right? So something needs to trigger these things, right? So you don't just paste them there and leave it there, right? So use it wisely, right? I would say let's use it wisely, right? So that we don't end up having problem with our code, right? So I think let also resolve the other question where we could trigger these things by user input, right? So if I should go back again and then I refresh this man and on comment on this man, and we on comment on this other guy. Okay, and then we have a situation where we need to terminate when certain things is being typed. So maybe I could just simply do the same thing that we did earlier for my for loop. I would just leave an if condition, and then I could just say if let's say probably if the second number is above 100, right? It's above 100, then I could just simply just break. So this one too will also break if a user should type a number above 100, right? To type the value for number 2 above 100, then that would trigger this break, and this will terminate in this loop, even if the connection is still true. This will still terminate this loop. Right, so that would resolve that. That would fix that up for us completely. Right. So right. One more thing again before we wrap it up. Is nesting. So I talked about nesting, and nesting is similar to what we did with conditional right here. Nesting is what we did. Okay, please just step it up and let us know, right? So nesting is similar to what we have in conditional, so what we have here, where we can have a condition inside a condition, right? So we can also have loops inside loops. So you can have a for loop inside for loop, a for loop inside while loop, a while loop inside while loop, a while loop inside for loop, right? So you can make this thing up, but the way this thing works is that they will behave as the way they should behave, right? So they will behave as they should, or as they are meant to behave. So is it okay to change at least like at the same time you're using? So is it okay to change a list, okay, like to add remove of the item at the same time as you're using a for all to go to this? You can, if your tax says that you should, right? You can do it. No, it depends on what you are actually working on. It depends on what you're actually working on. So you can. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul. Right. So okay, so yes, you can, but you haven't gotten to list, so I won't really dwell much on that particular question. but you can if you want to, right? It depends on what you're working on. All right, so having this in mind again, let's look at nesting real quick and then wrap it up for today's class. Okay, so all right, so nesting is like I said, it's similar to our conditional. Maybe where we can have a loop inside loop. So please, but then I want again, please, if there's a means of avoiding nesting, please avoid nesting in loops, right? This slams your program a lot, especially if you're dealing with a bigger project, right? The more you nest, the heavier your program. The more you nest, the heavier your program. But then for the purpose of knowledge, right? And sometimes it may come in handy. Okay. So nested loops. So they are basically what? They're basically inside loops, right? So you have a loop inside another loop. So I'll do one example and then wrap it up there, right? So I'll tell you how we for loop. So if you have a for loop, like let's say for I in range, right? So for this one, I will not use the variable, so I'll leave it at underscore in range, right? And then this range I will just say 10. And then inside here again, I have another for you, right? And I'll leave them empty in range again. And I'll say 10, right? And then I will say print hello. Okay, I'll say print inner loop. And before that, I will simply just leave one print statement, so one empty print here. And then before this loop even comments, I'll just say print outer loop, right? So a message before the inner loop even start executing. So I'll call it outer loop, right? So that could be our loop inside loop, right? So this is a message inside, and this is a portion of code that needs to be repeated 10 times, right? But for this other inner loop, this is a portion of code that needs to be repeated 10 times for the inner loop. Now the way this loop will work is that for each time the outer loop iterates, the inner loop will complete 10 cycles. Now you see why loops are heavy. Now for each time the outer loop complete one time, the inner loop will complete 10 times. So it means that this man here will execute 100 times at the end of the day, because we have 10 times 10. See why I said avoid nesting, right? If possible, they make your code heavy. So let's just run this and let us see. So as we should have one very long console, right? So I think that's if you look at my cursor on my right corner of my screen, then you see that we have a very long way from top to bottom, very long way. And if you count this inner loop will show you 100 times. So you can see that for one outer loop that showed, right? The inner loop showed 10 times. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So what should follow now is another outer loop. So that is the second time what the outer loop has fired. Right? And then what happened again? Another 10. 1, 2, and so on. And it will repeat like that till it finishes this loop. So that is how outer loop works, right? So know that what for nesting in loop, for one iteration of the okay, let me just write this out. For nested loop, for one iteration of the outer loop, the inner loop iterates completely. Right. So for one time this outer loop works, the inner loop finishes its entire cycle. And so it keeps doing like that, right? So a typical example of nested loop is our time. Yes, is our time, the time that we are using. So we have I think that should be about 3 nesting. So we have the hour loop, right? The hour loop followed by the minute loop, followed by the second loop, right? So it means that for each 1 hour, 60 minutes will complete, and for each minute, right, 60 seconds must complete. So it means that this man here, so here we look 60 times for us to have 1 minute, and here we'll look what another 60 times for half another minute. So here we'll wait again to what you whenever this one completes completely before it comes back again to change it. So that's a typical example of nesting, right? Our time itself. So it's inside what three nested loops, three nested loops. Question about nesting. Question about nesting. So please, I am like I said, if there is a means of accomplishing a task without nesting, please try as much as possible to do what to accomplish it without what nesting. Right? The more we nest, the heavier it is. So Mr. Victor, your hand is up.
Okay, good morning. I don't know
Mhm.
if you can hear me very well,
I can
but
hear you well.
yeah, my question is on for loop.
Okay.
And let's imagine we have, okay, basically the range, we know the range we want to use, right? Probably
Exactly.
10, whatever, right? Well, let's
Okay.
take an example. We have two numbers, A and B, and
Okay.
I don't know the range between that A and B, but I want my loop to run in the range between A and B, but I don't know that range. How do we now implement that? I don't know
Okay.
if
So
you
if
get
you
that.
want them, okay. So if you have two number A and B, right? A and
Yeah.
B, A and B, right? And we don't know enough, and we don't know the values of A and B, right? The values of A
Yeah.
and B is unknown, right? But then whatever the case is, we want this man to do what to execute between what the range of A and B, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So right, okay. So if I should do A, if I should do A is greater than B, it means that this should what that this should only be true if true, right? We want A to be what to be greater than B. So because for something to be range, right, it must have a smaller part, like the starting part and what the ending part, right? So at that point, I think while loop works better. At that point, while loop works better because we while loop we can create a kind of range. You might say what execute, right? While A probably where A is less than B, right? Or sorry, where A is greater than B. So as far as A is a starting point, right? As far as A is a starting point, so sorry, D should be less than because if A is starting point, that means A is smaller than B. So only execute where A is less than B. Then at some points increment it. So that means it will go in that range to what to get to the last number. I'm making sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah. So I think where loop works there, right? So the thing is that in for loop only works, you must know it, right? You must know your number of times it will iterate. But in some way where you don't know, use while loop, right? And construct a condition that fits it, and you're good to go. So
Okay,
it
thank
means
you.
that all right. So it means that within your while loop, then we should be incrementing at some point. So we have something like this: that A plus A. So A should be equal to A plus 1, right? So at some point in your loop. Okay, so at that point, it will start and then end at some point. All right. Any other question? Or you can minus exactly. So you see that's the beauty of programming, right? You can simply just minus, right? So if you don't want, if you see intent to use for loop, you can simply since it's range, right? Simply subtract the upper bound by from so simply subtract the lower bound from the upper bound, and you get what the specific range, and then you can pass it to range, right?
Sorry, one more question. Still on that range, is it possible to
Right?
like perform a mathematical arithmetic or whatever in the range parentheses?
Yes,
Like
yes, yes.
probably doing this minus inside the range.
Yes, of course. But then you can use any expression that must evaluate to an integer, right? So you can use
Yeah.
any expression that must evaluate to an integer. So it doesn't really have to be a fixed number there. You can have where that range, where the range, right? So you can where do we have right? So you can have something like this. So if I wanted this to be 5, I can simply just say 10 minus 5, and it will do the math, right? I know it's 5 and fix it up.
All right.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, Mary Jane, your hand is up.
Okay, good morning, sir. So my question is, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so my question is, can we use match case in place of if statement
Yeah,
for
match.
example?
Yeah, match is it's almost similar to if statement, but yes, you can use match in place of if. But then the way match works is slightly different from how if works. It's slightly different. But then but then conditional statement does it all. That's the reason why we don't actually cover match. Right? Well, you can actually look it up. Though. Match works. It works. So where you have a specific condition and then you match that the result of the condition for each of cases, right? For each cases, right? So you can use match, yeah, and it works. But
Okay,
but
thank you.
but be conditional, you can. I don't think there will be ever maybe need where for match, right? So you can just work out things with conditional statements rather than using match. Okay, Mr. Barry, your hand is up as well.
Okay, sir. What I wanted to ask is now about this, so is like kind of personal.
Okay.
So, okay, I'm using Pilot 3 on Android. So if I save what I've coded to my Google Drive folder, so how am I to get the link to that store so that I'll submit it on the LMS
Yeah.
platform?
So basically, what you want to do is you want to save those files in your phone because Python cannot actually. I don't think you can save that directly to your drive. So what you're going to do is you want to save those files within your folder in your phone, right? In your phone, and then you move that folder. Probably if you go to your drive, you would see where it says upload folder. Right? I can't show you my drive at this point, but then if you go to your drive, you see where it say upload file or folder. So click on folder and not file. So folder will permit you to upload a folder from your phone. Now, once it's uploaded, if you click on that file, on that folder, there is an option. There is a place where you will see option, and then you see where it says share. When you click on it, it will give you a link. And that's the link that you submit.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So it's similar to what you did in your first task, but this time around, yeah, it's for folder and not a single file. So it's the same process.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Okay. Miss Regina. Okay, your name is up. Hello. Please, you can unmute and ask your question. All right. So for some reason, I think we can't hear from Miss Regina, right? For some reason, we can't hear from her. All right. So yeah. Also, one more thing. Also make sure that the folder is accessible to public, right? So don't end up submitting a folder that someone else can access, right? Okay. So any other question? Any other question? Okay, so the silence means there's no other question that we are good to go. So I'll leave us to go and look at that tax again one more time. And I assure you that this time around it will make a lot of sense. Right? When you look at it, you will know where loop comes in, right? And what kind of loop comes in, right? So this question is mixed. There is a loop, there are question that requires you to use while loop, and there are those that require you to use for loop. So I'll leave you guys to figure that out and then incorporate everything that we've learned. So there is typecasting in that question, there is variables, there is input, output, there is a conditional statement, and there is loop. So basically everything that we've learned is within that question. So you play around with it and submit it before deadline, right? Because consequences that if you send it after deadline, you cannot just go above cutoff mark. That is the consequences. So for those of us that are seeing ourselves on 75 dots, it doesn't mean that what you did was not correct. It was correct, So but no matter how correct, as far as you've gone, if you after the deadline, you cannot go be above 75. The best you can have is 75. So try and submit on before time, right? Because if you submit after time, the best being that you've tried, like you've really tried to sit under 75, right? Apart from that, you always go below. So there are consequences, please. All right, so I'll leave us to go and and play around with it and come up with something wonderful. All right, so in the absence of any other thing, we've come to the end of this class, and I'll see us on Monday. Bye.
Carry on. You have to stop the recording. Carry on, stop the recording.
Oh, okay.
And now the host stop the recording and kick everyone out.
The meeting is over, I mean.